Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to FOL Marketplace. That's our business, economic, and finance show on focus on Liberia. My name is Dennis Jar, and we are broadcasting from Atlanta, Georgia. In today's edition of FOL Marketplace, we're going to be looking at the growth drivers of the Liberian economy. Growth, economic growth, and what drives growth. And we're going to be focusing on our 5 key sectors of the Liberian economy. With me to discuss the growth drivers of the Liberian economy is Professor Larry Kennedy, or Lawrence Kuhn Kennedy. There's a history of that name, but we're not going to delve into that. Professor Larry, welcome to the show.
Like the man said, there's a history on that name, and we're not going to dive into that. Always a pleasure to be here with you, Dennis. Always great having these conversations on FOL Marketplace, the place where I think we kind of elevate the conversation a little bit. And this is an important conversation because it has to do with the quality of life in Liberia. If you're enjoying life, well, good for you. But we'll come to understand that there's a majority of people in Liberia not doing well. And we try to understand what can be done about that. So glad to be here with you. And I look forward to a very, very good conversation with you and the other panelists.
Thank you. Also joining us, and he's just from service, so he has the Holy Spirit. Mr. Emmanuel Jackson. Mr. Jackson, welcome to FOL Marketplace.
Always good to be on FOL. And I think FOL is going to be the future of especially our marketplace, discussing the economic issues concerning the marketplace in Liberia and how we can go forward to build a better economy for the future. I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Let me also welcome our resident economist, Depu Zuo, who's joining us on the phone. Depu, welcome to the marketplace. Oh, Depu just dropped off. So that's fine. We want to welcome our viewers from across the globe on FOL Marketplace, where we discuss business, finance, economics, and everything in between. Today's topic is growth drivers of the Liberian economy, and we are looking at the CBL report. If you are on the CBL website and you look at it says Central Bank of Financial and Economic Bulletin, Open Volume 23, Number 3, that is July to September 2022. That will be the background of our discussion today. So let me start the discussion by asking, because we are talking about drivers of the economy, growth drivers of the economy. So let's start by saying, what is economic growth? What is economic growth? Let me start with Emmanuel, and then we go to Larry. What is economic growth? That's our first question.
I think let's give an elementary definition of economic growth. I think economic growth is when we manage our finances well in the country and divert it to sustaining social economic programs in the country, then we have economic growth. But when we're not managing our finances well, then we have problem with economic growth. So I think it stems from how we manage our money. This is very crucial, and I think this is where we've been finding a lot of difficulties in Liberia. We haven't been managing our money, whether it comes from our GDP or whether it comes from donor funds or whatever we get in the national budget. We always have budget shortfall that causes a delay in economic growth. So I think if we have a well-balanced management program of our finances, I'm definitely sure we're going to see economic growth in the future.
Thank you. Larry?
Yeah, in addition to what Emmanuel said, economic growth also has to do with how you transform your economy, how you change your economy around. If you look at the Liberian economy, you can see what some of the key drivers at, and I know we'll talk about it, but economic growth has to do with the increase in productivity in your economy, the increase in services in your economy, the increase in wealth in your economy. Are the people becoming a little bit more wealthier? And I'm not saying wealth in terms of being a millionaire, but if you are earning $680 a year, has it increased to $1,000 a year? So because your income is tied one-on-one directly to economic growth. So we can say economic growth has to do with how well the standard of living is improving in a country and across a broad spectrum. It can be healthcare. How is the healthcare services in improving the healthcare delivery services? How is education? How is education being delivered? Is that improving as well? The number of people unemployed, is that going down? So economic growth ties into all the things that directly, I don't care what sector of the economy or what sector of Liberia you are. If the economy isn't growing, it's going to definitely affect you in one shape or form. So it is so important that you have sustained economic growth, not, you growing at 5% one year, then the next year you're -3. That is not sustainable economic growth. But economic growth has to do with how well people are benefiting year over year over year with the resources in the country.
And how will, and with this a discussion, anyone can pick it up. How will we know that the economy is growing? Because
Well, we
the
have to
economy
measure it.
it's not a tree, right? Or is it like you have this tree every day, you see it adding 1 inch? How will we know?
Well, we can still use the tree, sort of a metaphor. We can still use the tree as an example. So if the tree one year is about, let's say, 4 feet high, the next year you expect the tree to grow maybe to about 5 or 6 feet in length. But if the tree is not growing, then nothing is happening. So the economy, for example, we measure the economy by counting or calculating all of the goods and services that the country produces. And then we take it from one year and we measure it to the next year. So, for example, like in at the end of Ebola, by 2016, the economy had grown up to, let's say, about 3 billion in terms of all the activities in the country. And then by 2017, 2018, you expect that to maybe grow to maybe like 3.1 or 3.2 billion, but it fell. So when you're looking at economic growth and you don't see it growing, meaning all of the goods and services produced within the country, if it's not growing, meaning more people are not going to work and benefiting, then your economy is not growing and the people will suffer. Yeah. And I think when some people say, hey, things are hard in Liberia, that is one of the main reasons, because the economy just is not growing. It's stagnant. It's like, still water just sitting there,
Right. So Emmanuel, if the economy is growing,
and,
how do the people see it?
Well, the people will see it in their lives. Like Larry said, you see them having more money for disposable income to whether to buy their credit or buy food or have transportation fare to go to school, to go to work. And right now, currently in Liberia, this is one of the major problems. Liberia, most Liberians don't have the finances to even take advantage of these things, or to buy food, or to pay their way to work, or buy credit or data for the service to do their assignments and stuff. So it has to be measured in how the people are living. If the lifestyle of the people, if they're struggling and not meeting their everyday to day needs, then you have a problem with economic growth. And I think one of the things too we have to look at, because sometimes you have to look at outside influencing your economic growth. For example, Wall Street. If your economy is not monitored on Wall Street to know exactly how you're doing, how will you know as an economy what you're doing, what you're achieving? Sometimes it has to be from the outside looking inside. So it has a lot to do with the socio-economic improvement in the lives of the people. That where economic growth begins to show up. If that is not working, then you're not having economic growth, and you're trying to cover up a certain condition of the country or the economy that outsider will see and say, look, this country is not growing, because they will be able to tell from their monetary scale, for example, like Dun& Bradstreet and others. They will tell you, say, look, frankly, your economy is not rated, it's not credit wealthy, and it's not moving in a direction we can get projection how it's going to grow. So it's not sustainable. It's not moving forward. And I think one of the things too that is causing economic growth in Liberia is the budget of the government. Almost what I think 65 or 70% of the budget is spent on wage bill. So we're not putting money into places where we can see growth. Harvesting. We're not putting money in education. We're not putting money in electricity and better internet service and all these things. So this is where we have to determine whether we're growing or we're not growing.
Dennis, let me add something real quick. Another way you can measure economic growth is not strictly with the numbers. You can also measure it using something called the happiness index. In countries where people are happy, you will also notice that the economy is doing very well. In countries like places like Afghanistan, places like Sudan, places like the Democratic Republic of the Congo, all these places that have issues, political issues, places where you see there's a lot of protest, places where you see, like even in Liberia, when you see young people then following politicians, all these, the different types of protests, those are places where you can recognize that you don't have economic growth, because if you did, a lot of those young people would be at work. They would not be out there following politicians for chump change, right? So you can also measure how well a country is doing in terms of the well-being of the people by looking at the happiness index. Places like Finland, the Icelandic countries, right? The Finland, Norway, and all of those countries, and you'll come to realize that people there seems to be a little bit more happier because the economy tends to do very well. They have very, very low corruption. When you look at Transparency International corruption rate, very low in those countries. They always rank very high in terms of fighting corruption. And then when you look at countries in Africa, you can tell there's a problem because a lot of those countries then they are doing very poorly in fighting corruption. So the happiness index is one way to also measure how well the economy is doing.
And Larry, the opposite of growth is not growing or decline, right? So if the economy is not growing, what is this negative growth?
Yeah, so if your economy is not growing, then you can fall into either a recession, which is if you have, in the US, they measure recession in terms of how many months or how many quarters the economy did not grow. So you take Liberia, for example, where the economy didn't grow for 36 consecutive months. That's not even a recession. That's past recession stage. That's more of a depression in the economy, because the economy fell in 2018. It fell again in 2019, and it fell again in 2020. So when you have 36 months of continued economic, not even stagnation, economic decline, Liberian economy was in a depression. But what's interesting that, and this one reason why you had the World Bank putting out a report saying the poverty rate in Liberia increased. So more people became poorer in Liberia over the past 36 to 48 months than at any other time, because the economy just wasn't growing. It wasn't creating jobs. People were going to the market to buy food. It just wasn't enough money in the economy to go around. But a few people did extremely well. So to answer your question, Dennis, if the economy is not growing, it can fall either first into a recession, and then it can fall into a depression, which is a worst case scenario. The last time the U.S. economy had a depression, that was back in 1929, when they had the when they had the depression here. And that depression lasted until 1933, when FDR came in and they put together a new deal to kind of get the economy growing again. So when you hit depression, it'll take a long time sometimes to get out, Yeah, so the economy not growing, you can fall into a recession, then a depression.
And how do we get out? And anybody can, because if the economy is not growing, or if the economy is declining, it's either stagnant or is going down. Because sometimes when I see the GDP numbers, I see the in minus, right? So in that case, what do we do?
Emmanuel, before you come in, I'll swing it over to
what?
you. So real quick, one thing, let's take an
Okay.
example for let's take the US for example. So we know that in 2007, 2008, the US economy hit a brick wall. That's when the Great Depression not depression, recession took place. In that recession,
Yeah.
that's the thing. When the US economy sneezes, right? When the US economy is sneezing, the rest of the world is going to catch a cold. So that impacted pretty much everybody, like Liberian economy, every country out there. Well, most countries, some countries like Singapore wasn't impacted by it. But the US economy fell in 2000, 2008. In fact, when the US economy was falling, because Singapore wasn't involved in that nonsense, that was when Singapore passed the US economy in terms of growth per individual in the country, GDP per capita. So what did the US do? Obama came in and he laid out this whole Obama plan. The way you get out is to increase government spending. If you look around the US, anybody living in New Jersey, you will see how the New Jersey Turnpike, the renovation, the construction in the New Jersey Turnpike. Take a look at bridges around the United States. Government has to increase the spending to get out by increasing.
And that's the thing I don't understand, Larry, about this increased spend. And Emmanuel, please adjust your camera. We want to see your passport size valid.
Okay. You can see me now?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
So
Okay.
that's the thing I don't understand. It's like, and maybe let me relate it to myself. Already, I'm declining. I don't have money, and then they say, "Well, if your hand going down, buy more things." I mean, where would the money come from? So, how does this government increase spending? Where is the money coming from to increase the spending if the economy is already free fall, if it is declining? And how can we relate that to Liberia? Because for Liberia, maybe we, how we do that?
Well, I don't know, Emmanuel, you want to touch on that or you want me to go
Well,
on?
yeah, well, Larry touched on just what I was going to talk. It has to come from government spending. It has to come from. I will go back to Bill Clinton. When Bill Clinton came, he invested in what they call the Community Reinvestment Act, which brought money to a lot of urban areas to increase services for them. For example, job or training program. I benefited from one of them because there weren't a lot of minority people working in the financial business. So I took advantage of some of the program that was in the community reinvestment program. I went to a program and then I got some basic training, even though I had the knowledge. And then I went through job training and went into to work for the bank. So the government has to step in it because the government is the sole entity that is gearing towards economic growth. And it cannot come from even private investors. The government has to set the right economic policies and follow up on it. The case of our country is that we haven't seen a sustained economic policy that have gone at least for 20 years to produce economic growth, which is a major problem, and it all because of the budget. We have a budget that relies on donor funds, to sustain economic growth in the economy in Liberia. And then again, the extractive industry, how are we spending the money from the extractive industry? How are we reinvesting the money? So to just put it into a nutshell, it has to come from government programs or government economic policies. Because remember, when Bush was falling, he called McCain and Obama in the office. And when Obama won, like Larry said, he came in and he put in a lot of money for government programs, even though the Republicans did not want to honor it, but some of it went through and he was able to revitalize the American economy. So it has to start from the government, and it has to start from a sustainable kind of economic policy where we have long-term policy in place, and not after every 3 years, then you see, you have a negative balance on your GDP, or you have negative balance on your budget, you have budget shortfall. It has to be a sustainable period that's going into the future. And this is where we keep falling short. We don't have economic policies in our country that last for even 10 years that we can see sustainable development. every year before the past budget, we're struggling to get money from here, to get money from there. If donors don't send money in, we will not be able to even pay employees, let alone create job for those coming out of school or those who already struggling in the job market looking for job. So this has the driver behind it is the government and the government economic policies that they put in place and follow up on it. Don't just say you're going to do it and don't do it. You have to follow up on it and sustain it and see it grow. And that is another thing you have to do is to minimize corruption. And if you find people practicing corruption while you have this policy in place, you punish them. You expose them and say, look, people we have money here to do this. This person did that. Then, you would give other people the opportunity to stop it. But, we cover up on these things and then we expect economic growth. It cannot be pie in the sky. It has to be something that it has to be real. You have to see it is tangible. Economic growth is tangible. It's not something you just put a lot of figures on paper and call national conference. No, it don't work that way. Like Larry talked about the depression. I had the opportunity to meet an elderly gentleman here in Boston, and he told me, he said, what they did was when they went through that depression, they put in economic policies to grow the economy. And he said, what you see now in Boston, all these development going on, is because we said, you know what, we're going to focus on building the point where even if it takes 100 years, we'll see progress. And this is what we have to do in Liberia. It has to start from the government. And my macroeconomic professor told us the government is the problem, in these developing countries.
Thank you. Larry, same question. Government spending, increased government spending at a time you are struggling. How does that happen? Because me as an individual, there's no way. Maybe taking a loan, then I'm just digging hole to cover hole.
So if the government starts spending on building roads, that means they're going to hire more construction companies, or even if they spend more money on education, they're going to hire more teachers. If they spend more money on the healthcare sector, they're going to hire more nurses and doctors. The thing is, as they start spending more money in these sectors, the companies in those sectors will end up hiring people. Those people now will go to the store and will buy, goods, or they may buy services. Whatever it is they're buying, that store now will need to go to a manufacturer to make more. That manufacturer now will need to increase capacity by hiring more people to put in the factory. And that's why when the government starts spending, it follows something called, is by this economist. He had a model out there. His name is John Maynard Keynes, right? It followed this Keynesian model that would trickle down. So when the U.S. government spends, the money would trickle down to the construction companies, trickle down to the employees within the companies that goes to the store, and then it trickles down to the manufacturing, and then it leads to economic growth because that money tends to, recycle within the economy.
Larry, where is that money coming from? Maybe because I'm thinking like I'm in Liberia. Where is that money coming from?
So we'll come to Liberia in a second. And Liberia does the same thing, right? A lot of countries are doing the same thing. The money. So the U.S. stopped backing their currency like in 1971. They stopped backing their currency with the gold when Nixon came in. And that was the whole reason why the IMF should have been kind of dissolved, but the IMF hung around. The money comes strictly from the Bureau of Engraving. The U.S. just prints money. There is nothing backing the U.S. currency. The U.S. prints money. You can refuse to accept the U.S. money. You can say, I want to barter, maybe Dennis. I don't want to take your money. Instead, I want you to give me your computer, or maybe give me your left kidney or something. But we can barter, right? But the problem is when the U.S. print money, this is one reason why you saw gasoline. Well, I mean, there were a couple of reasons with the Ukrainian war and all that stuff. But as you print more money, it's going to lead to an increase in prices. And we saw prices here in the U.S. economy shooting up because when Biden came in with the Build Back Better, he started giving everybody these checks. And I'm sure you received your own check, right?
Yeah.
Come on, Dennis.
I did.
Yeah, I got checked.
You got your check. So that money, they were just printing it. just all willy-nilly. They were just printing it and they were just dishing it out. So it leads to inflation. Same thing in Liberia. You will notice that in 2018, when we had this whole fiasco about the missing billions, a lot of money entered the Liberian economy. Inflation in Liberia shot up to about 28% because there was a lot of money out there chasing fewer goods. So the prices on goods automatically went up because there was a lot of money in the economy. The central bank can print money. Liberia, just like other countries, they don't have anything to back up their currency. There's nothing backing up the currency. So you can, in fact, print money.
When you say backup, mean we're not exporting, we're not producing?
No, backing it up in terms of, hey, if I don't want to accept your currency, or if I need something to say, I can transfer this currency to like gold. Like in the US, they used to back up the currency with gold. You know, the US now, if you look on the US dollar, it says that it is backed by the full faith of the US government. That's the only thing that's backing it up. The US government is not going to default on that currency if you use it. And also on the US dollar, it says it is good to pay all debt, public and private. So if I owe you money, if I hand you that cash and you say, look, there's nothing backing it, you cannot take me to court. In Liberia, we have nothing backing it. They can print money all willy-nilly. But here's the problem, Dennis. Inflation in the US was low. And then Biden started printing money for his Build Back Better plan. And then inflation shot up and people started crying. The Republicans went after him. Inflation in Liberia is already high. If you were to print more money and put it in the economy, meaning the prices you're paying today for food, it's going to shoot up even more if you print more money. This is why I hope that there will be presidential debates for all these candidates to come out and explain how they intend to keep prices low, at the same time grow the economy. Because the way you grow the economy, you have to increase productivity, you have to spend more money. But as you're spending more money, it can also lead to inflation, which means the poor people will suffer more because poor people spend more of the money buying food. So if I'm paying, let's say I'm paying for a cup of rice today, or I'm buying bitter ball or something, prices go up, it's going to hurt me because I'm not getting more money coming in from jobs. So it was so important in 2017 to have debates. But we noticed that a few people, some very critical people, did not go to the debate. So now we need people to come. We haven't heard the central bank explain. When was the last time you saw the governor of the central bank have a news conference and explain the monetary policy that they're implementing? Right. We don't hear that stuff. So the way to do it, Dennis, to answer your question, we will have to increase spending activity. The government will have to increase spending in activity. The government will have to set aside capital for small businesses to borrow money and start businesses and do all of that. I know what your next question is going to be. Where are they going to get the money from? You can't have this bank just printing money all the time. They're going to have a problem. They keep printing money.
Can I add to that too?
Right, because I want to see in the case of Liberia, Emmanuel, in the case of Liberia, for the government to increase spending, where would the money come from? Go to IMF, World Bank?
Yeah, well, go ahead, Emmanuel. I'll give you some suggestions on how to do that.
Another area that the government could get money from, it depends on the institutional investments they have in the country. You see, like Larry was talking about the US, they have solid institutional investment. They don't have to rely on gold to get money. You know,
what does that mean? These institutional investment.
Okay, institutional investment meaning big companies probably investing billions in your economy. You know, take for example, Alexis, Toyota. What's the new car now? What's the guy name?
I got Hyundai.
Elon Musk's car industry. You know, these big institutional investment. You know, if the government is running low on capital, it can go to these institutions and say, look, my man, you're selling your car in my economy. You've been here more than 25, 30 years. I need you to give me, a couple of billion so I can invest in the economy. They will do. They have the capital. and they want the business to continue to sustain. So, it's very important to have good institutional investment in your country, and this is what we're lacking. I mean, just look at the 66 concession investments we have in Liberia. It's not producing anything in terms of creating jobs or creating industry that we can see. We can see that we're benefiting. So that's one area too. I'm just looking at that area too, because I work on that when I work in the bank, and it also falls on wealth management. So there's so many areas in the economy that
So
the
does that
government
mean in Liberia
can
we
turn to
go
and
to the
get money.
Lebanese, the Indians, and the Syrians, and the Fullers? Is that the same? Would that be our form of institutional investment?
We don't even do that. We don't even go to those people, because I mean those people business is basically on retail commercial levels. It's not already industrial commercial level. I remember even though it's something that wasn't big, but when the PRC took over first, what it was, they said all companies investing in Liberia, we want you guys to contribute to our first anniversary. And those PRC raised over more millions, because of the industries that we had at that time, country. That's just one example. So, it's very, very important to have institutional investment that are grounded, and, the government can turn to help in times of crisis.
Thank you, Laura. It doesn't seem that you really agree on that, but
Well, I mean, you can use institutional investors to buy your debt as a way to kind of borrow money. The U.S. does that all the time in terms of they sell treasuries. Liberia does it, the CBL, they sell CBL bills. But why are some countries in Africa doing better than others, including why they're doing better than Liberia? And where do you get this money from, to answer your question?
Right.
Take Rwanda, for example. In 2021, Rwanda had about 78 foreign direct investment companies coming to the country, bringing in over 1.2 billion in foreign direct investments. Bringing that kind of, in fact, South Africa.
Hold your thought. Let me welcome Isaac Batuba. Isaac is an economist too, but he spent a good bit of his time in politics, so people don't really know. But Isaac can talk these numbers. Isaac, welcome to FOL Marketplace.
You see, you don't say I spend more time in politics, defining my time. Or I correct you now, I say something, then you say you get first again. Just leave it, just say Isaac, just leave me.
But Isaac, he didn't say your name properly. He said Isaac Bad Tokba.
No, I didn't say bad. I said bad.
Oh, I'll get him in trouble.
Go ahead, Larry.
he said Isaac Bad Tokba. He said Isaac Bad Tokba. But yeah, like I was saying, I was swinging to my brother Isaac. You have to bring foreign direct investments. That's one way to bring the capital in. South Africa last year,
meaning companies from outside coming in with businesses like Metal Steel,
like Metal Steel, but not to rent your resources to places like Metal Steel, because Metal Steel comes in, take the iron ore, and then they leave. We're just what we call rentiers. We're renting our resources, and the craziness about it is those resources,
they get finished.
They eventually run out. They're not going to be there forever. So we need to have something other than our natural resources. So, like I said, Rwanda, they brought in about 70-something foreign direct investors into the country, raised over $1.2 billion to help the economy. There's a problem with that as well, because, Kenya tried the same thing, and then China came in and started, bringing investments. And China does the same thing in Liberia. They end up doing the work themselves because China, what's the population in China? Over 1.7 billion people. They end up bringing their own people into the country to kind of do the work, as opposed to having the local people do the work. So that's the problem. Recently, I think it was last year, the U.S. government published on the State Department's website that South Africa and Botswana had combined and were bringing investors into the country. That's how you raise the money. Also, not just printing money. Zimbabwe got into printing money during Mugabe's time. It was Zimbabwe, right, Isaac? Emmanuel. They got into printing money and it ended up with hyperinflation. Yeah. Argentina, you can't just print money all willy-nilly and nothing to back it up. You will end up with inflation year over year over year. You'll be sitting down in a restaurant in Zimbabwe eating a bowl of rice. And by the time you finish, the price of that bowl of rice have doubled on you. So you can't just keep printing money. America has a strategy to bring foreign direct investments. I'm not going to get into details of how that works, but Liberia can do something similar. You know how? Tap the diaspora. Right. You can tap the diaspora to raise money, but the diaspora have to trust your government in order to want to bring money to invest into the country. You need a strong legal system, but not going to go too far off. Let me swing it to Isaac. I know he's just coming. He may want to add a few things in there.
Isaac, welcome. We're discussing the growth drivers of the Liberian economy, and we started by saying what is economic growth, and the opposite of that is it is not growing. It's declining. So Isaac, I just want to greet my opening. Hold on, Emmanuel. Let's ask.
Hey, man, see what you say. My snapper here, brother. No, I say I just want to greet Alpha, my snapper here, brother. I was born snapper here. Grew up on snapper here.
Okay, nice. We are discussing offline. We gotta know your era.
Right. Yeah, you guys got to discuss it offline. Let's go back to economic growth.
So you're saying, Dennis?
No, I said I want your opening. I was just giving you a rundown of where we are so far. Okay. Economic growth, or we discuss what economic growth is and what it is when it's not growing. And the next place we're going now is we can have economic growth. What is the difference or the similarity between economic growth and economic development?
I mean, it depends on what do you guys settle on as a definition of economic growth? Because sometimes people look at GDP, sometimes people look at other indicators in the economy to determine what economic growth is. So what have you guys decided is economic growth?
Well, that's no decision. I mean, you can just define it the best way you seem fit. My definition has to do with the changes in production within an economy, right? The year over year, whether it's growth in goods being produced within an economy, goods and services that translate into a quality of life. So, but you can just define it the best way you seem fit.
Right. Yeah, because for our country, let's say, Imai, you want to talk?
Yeah, no, I just want to say before you came over. If we look at our current, just look at the financial mismanagement that have gone on for 5 years. See, if we manage what we have lost from this mismanagement, definitely it will have shown through economic growth. That's what I wanted to say.
All right. Yeah. So we can look at our GDP over time from where we were in 2006 when this Ellen Sirleaf government took over. But we're coming from a war situation. So the opportunity for GDP growth over resumption of just normal economic activity was high. So you can give them that credit. But now we're in a space where we need actual economic growth, where the factors of production, the influx of foreign direct investment, just improving what people do to get better results. And that matters. You can't just keep doing the same thing and expect, real economic growth in your country. From moving away from being a rentier state, like, Larry was talking about, to value addition, to taking advantage of those areas that you have some comparative advantage in, especially in our continent where there's a lot of opportunities where we can provide stuff for other people. But I think someone mentioned it earlier, the involvement of government in facilitating those processes cannot be understated, whether from subsidizing, farmers, whether from just having a welcoming environment where foreign direct investment, especially where people who are controlled by foreign corrupt practices acts, will be able to operate freely in your country versus having to be corrupt, pay, demands, extortion demands from government officials to participate in the economy, and it just goes to the pocket and it limits them. The person haven't even really invested yet. They haven't even gotten $1 return, and you're asking them for 15-20% of the company. You're asking them for money. That prohibits any legitimate investor from investing in your country. And then there's the whole untapped opportunity of the diaspora, right? What is the diaspora program to attract them to believe in the leadership, for one, to believe that the judicial system protects them, that contractual arrangements are honored, for them to be able to invest in their own country, or just even whether it's just other African diaspora people or Black Americans. So some of those fundamentals of investment with regards to trust, with regards to contracts, are not existing in our environment right now. So it's tough for us to say, we'll do that until we can get leadership that can engender those factors that are the basis for, people investing the money in any kind of situation. We can just, expect things to just continue to go as it is with, some of the Lebanese and Indians on the ground who are already in a corrupt system, just getting more opportunities and more monopolies on the opportunities that exist in the country.
Thank you. Larry, I was talking also about economic growth and economic development, right? Because it first tell me the difference, and is it possible that we can have the economic growth and still that does not translate into the living standard of the people? So let's get the two clear, if you don't mind.
So with economic growth, we know that your economy as a whole, everything that is produced in a country year over year over year, it is growing. Right. If your economy is producing about $3 billion worth of goods in 2022, in 2023, we expect it to be about, say, 3.5 billion. So you have about $500 million in economic growth, meaning all of the goods and services in the country. The problem with Liberia is a lot of the growth that we have seen has simply been in terms of the raw material, the natural resources, the iron ore, the oil palm, the cassava, all those things. Then we see a lot of it, especially the iron ore in the extractive sectors. And we see a lot of the raw materials. Yeah, go ahead, Abba.
I say, and gold in recent times.
And gold, and all those things, we see them being extracted and shipped right out of the country. So you have, and because we count those things as being produced within Liberia, sort of. So we say, okay, we have economic growth. But to your second question, Dennis, what does that have to do with economic development? Well, the quality of life now, if you have economic growth, is it being translated into better education because now the government is collecting more taxes from all of that economic activity, and they're taking that taxes and putting it into better schools? Well, take a look at the premier university in Liberia. That university doesn't even qualify as some of the worst high schools in some of the better countries in Africa. They're university buildings. So are we seeing development in terms of road network? Unfortunately, Liberia still have one of the highest incident of people dying from accidents on the roadway. So we're not seeing development or things getting better in that space. Is it translating into better healthcare? Well, we see the other hospitals and stuff coming in, the Emirates Hospital, and we see the 14 military hospital. But it's the life expectancy. And those hospitals are not equipped. So we're not going to go down that route. That's another conversation. But do we see better healthcare in the country? What is the infant mortality rate in Liberia? It is still one of the worst in the world. What is the maternal mortality rate? How many women are dying by giving life to somebody else, to the child? It's still high in Liberia. So the development part, some people who are sycophantic, who really want to lick the government boots, will come and say something otherwise. But the reality is the crime rate in Liberia is very high. The U.S. State Department publishes warning for U.S. citizens when they go into Liberia to stay out of certain areas, do not travel certain time. Very high crime rate, which has to do with the standard of living as well. People who love the president will never see these things, but ask them to walk in certain neighborhood at night and they will never do it. You know, look at the unemployment rate. We have to do with development as well. You have the problem too is we do not collect sufficient data to measure how well things are doing. So we kind of rely on some of the numbers given to us by the World Bank, the IMF, and USIT, because ListGIS that should be collecting money from the Ministry of Finance, they're not properly funded, and the people in ListGIS are government operatives. So they're not independent. So that's why you have situation, and Iva Emmanuel would agree with me, back in the 60s when you have a couple of investigators go to Liberia and they say, oh, wow, Liberia has a very strong economic growth rate. People were jealous about the economic growth rate in Liberia, but there was no development.
Right.
The people in the rural sector was even poorer than before. The people in Monrovia were even poorer than before. So you had that growth, but it didn't translate to development. Whereas in other countries, you can see the economy growing. Like in the US, Biden is putting out some very strong employment numbers because the economy is growing just as well. That's why they're trying to increase interest rate to slow down the economy. You can see it in other countries. It doesn't happen that way in Liberia.
You can even see it right next door to Ghana.
Development.
Right, and so let me Isaac and Emmanuel come into. So you give an example of raw materials, right? We produce these things, and so when you calculate, that means growth. But because they are shipped abroad, so they don't come back to develop the place. What other areas that is impacting this so-called growth without development?
Oh, you can look at multiple areas.
Stress on that.
All right, go ahead, Emmanuel.
Yeah, one of the areas too that's impacting economic development and economic growth is capital flight. For example, how the banks in Liberia operate. People can just walk out of Liberia with millions of dollars every day. Is there measures being set in the banking sector that can restrict people to withdraw a certain amount on a daily basis? For example, like here in the US, I think it's 10,000 Bill me or Larry or Iva. But people can just walk out of Liberia with any amount of money, and that has an adverse effect on economic development. So we have a tremendous capital flow that leaves the country daily, and that also have an impact on money being circulated in the economy to help small, medium-sized investors, or even the market women, other people. Sometimes they just don't have money to go out and buy goods because the banks just don't have the money, because single depositors get with millions of dollars a day without the government knowing. So we need to have a kind of restrictions that, at least it should be a limit that anybody can withdraw from the bank on a daily basis. So I think capital flight too has a very serious impact on the economy when it comes to economic growth and development.
Thank you.
It does, but the question, Dana was asking like specific areas. So you look at he just talked about mining, right? The same with iron ore, right? The same with cocoa. The same with nearly everything we export. There's no value addition to anything. So the opportunities for job creation, the opportunity for some of the downstream revenue from those extractive products to be circulated in our country is very limited, and it doesn't happen. So those are areas. Look at right now. I bet whatever fish stuff, in our fishery sector that the people taking off the ocean right now, they're not even bringing it for our people to clean it onshore. It's counted as, produce from Liberia, right? That production. But how impactful is that production to our economy? That's where the limitation is. So to the extent that we can actually utilize our resources, bring them some on the ground, and be able to, add value within our community. I mean, look at the diamonds. I don't even think we have one diamond processing plant in the country, but right now we're exporting significant amount of diamond from the country. Same with gold is limited in terms of what value addition happens with gold. So until we can get those things going, to expand the economic activity that's on the ground, because you create a lot of jobs when you add the value. One practical example is Firestone. And I was involved with this, trying to bring a glove and condom manufacturing factory to Liberia, right? Firestone is supposed by law to give, like, I think 5% of the latex for local production. But because the consistency of that latex to produce gloves is a little different from what just comes right off from Firestone plant, they were not willing to do that next level of transformation, what was required for us to be able to, use the latex right there and produce it. So some of those things are restrictions in terms of how, additional downstream businesses can really expand the economy.
Isaac, if you don't mind, break that down a little more, because we say these things most of the time, right? The value addition. So how is that value addition, or how is having that latex or condom manufacturing in Liberia is going to contribute to development or growth?
Right. So let's say, like, in Nigeria right now, anybody can correct me. Dangote, just, I think, one of the largest oil refineries in the world, he just kind of built in Nigeria to add value to the oil. So that is going to create a huge number of jobs, and the value of that refined oil is way more than what they would just export the raw product for. So when you add value to any product, okay, let's make it simple. Say, let's say cassava leaf, all the potential we got for cassava. If we can just process our cassava leaf and our cassava, where we can ship a lot of that cassava leaf to the USF, to us who can be eating cassava leaf whole day, or the different kind of cassava products. If we can have a mill or something that can add value, that means the processing and the packaging into different products that we can export those. The return in terms of what people are paying for those exports will be significantly more than if you just export the raw cassava. Yes, it costs some number of dollars to invest in the value addition process, but the reward is way higher, the economic benefit is way higher, and that's something that our government should be pushing for any kind of extractive partner who comes in. What is your value addition proposition to the people of Liberia? That should be the question.
And Lara, it sounds so simple, right? Like, okay, anybody could see it. Like, this is a value. Instead of shipping the raw material, which you are selling at $10, why don't you change it to something else that you can sell in the country for $50, right? Simple. Why are we not doing it?
Because when you have leaders without vision, or you have people who do not understand the true value of their natural resources, if you have people who are renting their resources and are not very creative, they would be desperate to take whatever money that is being offered to them. It's plain and simple. They don't have to be creative to create in terms of...
Larry, you don't have the money to sometimes build those manufacturing plants, right? So you say, well, let me just ship it.
Oh, let me give you an example. Let me give you an example.
Build it, though.
Let me give you one example.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There's a group that used to, like, collect shoes in the US and ship it to Africa, right? Non-profit group. But then they look at it, is that really benefiting the people? Why don't we create a factory in Africa where we can produce some of these same shoes and be able to help people get in shoes, at the same time export those shoes, and some of the different rubber products we have. So now they are already, and there are investors for this kind of stuff. There is money out there for, how should I say, bankable projects that will ensure that our investor can get the funding based on the business plan and stuff. Yes, things can go wrong, but if you present a bankable plan that people can invest in, rely and assume and say, yes, based on this plan, based on all these activities that this potential, business person has laid down, I can put my money in there and expect to get some kind of return. And then also the environment in the country where the government is allowing, right? So with that there, those guys now, they have raised $20 million to go and open a plant to do those kind of feed products, and they got different varieties of it in somewhere like Ghana. Why it can be somewhere like Liberia? Because we don't create that environment. We don't invite the people to do those kind of things, because like Larry was saying, we have leaders with limited vision, right? They just want an immediate cut that they can get from that foreign direct investor who's looking to extract. But the person who coming to do real business, they can't afford to give you that stuff, because they're putting serious investment into the whole process, the whole manufacturing process, and they're running maybe a lean operation. So they can't come and just give you 100,000, 500,000 on the top to do business in your country. And that's what limiting us.
So it sounds like, and that's
can I just
what
add
Isaac
to-
just said.
Hold on, Emmanuel. Let Larry, you can complete, and then Emmanuel can come in.
Yeah.
So it's great in terms of what Isaac just said, because we talked about, we define what economic growth is. We look at what development is all about. And now this is great, because we're looking at what causes economic growth, which is what Isaac is touching on in terms of some of the things you need to do. So what are some of the things that causes economic growth? And I see one of your viewers here, your guest, must be from another platform, but it says factual, saying you need infrastructure to add value. That's true, because the causes of economic growth are, we can kind of summarize it. Yeah. So you do need infrastructure. So the key is what causes economic growth. You can kind of summarize it into three big sectors, right? One, you need resources. And the resources, Liberia has an abundance of that. It could be natural resources. We have a lot of those resources in there. You also would need something like, you need some institutions. Liberia has very weak institutions, because you see a lot of criminal element getting away with a whole lot of illegal activity within the country. And the lack of institutions is another critical factor that is, I don't want to use a big technical term, but it's a roadblock to economic growth in the country. So we have the natural resources. Another thing you need within the natural, and then you need a capital, right? The capital can be money, the infrastructure that actual factual is talking about. You need those capital. It can be human capital, right? And human capital, we have an abundance of that, because we have raw manpower. Even though the education level is challenged, but we have raw manpower that we can put to use, because some countries do not have that raw manpower. Liberia has an abundance of raw manpower, because our population is growing at a faster rate than other countries. We're growing at a rate of around 2.5%. We're putting in about 100,000 people or so every year into the country. So the country is growing very fast. So we have some of the key ingredients to productivity. The problem is we're not making the best use of those ingredients. We don't know how to we're not investing in the human capital. Let's start with that. Education is critical. The
Technical and vocational education.
The VOTEC is so critical. The ambassador, the last time he spoke about why it is, how Liberia can do well at Singapore. Singapore doesn't have resources. I mean, they got some fish and stuff, but we have an abundance of that stuff. But Singapore put a ton of money into education. People now are traveling to Singapore to understand the educational system. We need to invest a lot more of our GDP into education. Educate the young people with the VOTEC. Show them how to build solar panels. Solar panels, you have enough people building solar panels. You don't know, you can power a small village. People can stay up late, do some work, do some handcraft, and you can export that stuff under the AGOA American law and not pay tariffs on it. Look,
you see, Dennis, these things. Oh, sorry, let Emmanuel go down and come in with that.
I want to throw something here before, because Larry already hit the growth drivers we're going to next, right? So, I say, the human capital, physical capital, natural resources, technology, and you were just talking about human capital. I don't think we have it, right? Because it's not, human capital is not just human beings, right? They should be highly skilled. They should be educated.
Not necessarily highly skilled. It depends. Larry, look, right now, if we say we're committing to rice production, and every year we want to increase by 15-20%, let's say we put 30,000 hectares into production for rice. We need bodies, but at the same time, we need some level of mechanization. So
they should be trained.
And the bodies together. Let's say for even road production, road construction, we got to be able to mix the use of machines with the use of human labor, because many of our people, like we said, they don't have it. But at the same time, we got to train them up. So it got to be training. Because typical example right now, and Larry was talking about it, the security in the country. Before, market women used to get up 5 o'clock in the morning to go and start a market. Today, they get up 5 o'clock, they will probably check the market for them or do something to them. So they got to come when it's light in the day. So that take away nearly 2 hours of the productivity. They're on the back end to go home again. They got to go home early because they stay all late to get home. They will seize their stuff again, or they will take their phone, or they'll do something to them. So you kind of clustering or cramping the time that people have to do things. So it limit them. The same with simple electricity, Larry. If you don't have electricity, you have limited opportunity to work in the dark. But yeah, you know you can work 24 hours a day, Dennis. 24 hours a day if you want.
And that's my question, right? Because I don't think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think we have these drivers, right? I was talking about the trained workforce. We talk about the physical capital, the factories, the
Dennis, we have
plants.
access to get them. Take,
all right.
For example, this Power Africa thing. What is government strategy to tap into Power Africa? What is the holistic strategy to say, okay, on a personal level and with Cotton, we try to get Power Africa, or we're going to do anything less than $10 million. So what is government approach to tap into these resources that are available out there? There's none. You can do it. You can get renewable energy across your country if you really look for the right partnership and opportunities, and you can support businesses. You can identify people who already in our line. Let's say my mother who got one generator that you can sell to 2 people and get electricity. Say my mother would think you could be a renewable energy kind of agent. There are grants out there, especially for women, to be able to get into the renewable energy sector and sell energy to especially areas where they know there is no substation or no main station. They're not connected to the grid. Those areas have huge opportunity for renewable energy support. But there's nobody looking out for these people to help them, to elevate them. And it takes a government that concerned and wants to do this stuff for that to happen.
Thank you. So Emmanuel, to drive the economy, we need. Yeah, Emmanuel, coming to you. Let me lay out first, Emmanuel, coming. You need technology. We don't have it.
Okay.
The only thing we're talking about here most of the time is natural resources. But they transport, the roads, the buildings, the factories, we don't have them. The trained workforce, we don't have them. So how we expect this economy to grow? Emmanuel, you can come in now with your points.
We have to look at the the major factor of economic development is land, labor, and capital. And if we look at our land situation in Liberia, we're still living on only 10% of the land. We have 90% of the land still vacant. And I think what Ava is driving at when he talk about treaty, that's developing the labor market. If we develop our labor market, it can push us towards economic growth. The capital part of it, we can look at that too from the extractive industries. Take what happened in the Western Cluster area, in B Mountain. You have 600,000 tons of gold that is being extracted from Grand Cape County. Let's just include Bomi County, Bapolu, and Cape Mount. Okay, it's going to Turkey. 600. I mean, how can these guys sign an agreement that a Turkish company will take 600,000 tons of gold out of Liberia without any trace of infrastructure development in Cape Mount, Bomi, or Bapolu area? At least if 300,000 tons stays in Liberia, like Ava was talking about refining our gold, we built 2 refining gold and diamond. That will create tremendous capital in Liberia and also jobs, and will create tremendous infrastructure development, Cape Mount, Bomi, and Bapolu area. So you won't tell me the resources just growing and there's no infrastructure development in those places? How do we expect the future of our young people to develop if we don't develop infrastructure development like hotels, like the better schools? The only technical school in Cape Mount area, they're in the Sinje area. The students that graduated from that, they don't get employed at B Mountain. In fact, B Mountain had a dispute with the labor ministry, because they were bringing in the Turkish people in the jobs that was supposed to go. So these are the factors that is driving the decline in our country. The kind of agreements that have been signed over the year, we have to review these agreements. 600,000 tons of gold, that's a lot of gold going out of the country. I don't know how much an ounce of gold costs now. But I mean, if you can have just 300,000 tons of that gold stay and refine in Liberia and decide to use the finances from refining the gold, you can build infrastructure in Cape Town. Cape Town need hotels. You can build at least a hotel, and you will create jobs for young people there, right in the Western Cluster area. So how can we sit around and sign this kind of agreement, and with all our extractive industry just going and going, and every year we just promising the people that we're gonna do better for them. It's not gonna work that way, And like Alva was saying, that the labor market, which is also a major factor of economic development, it has to come from training. It has to come from developing technical schools and jobs and centers. We can even build wind farms. Liberians are intelligent. If you give them an opportunity now, you see they will build wind farm all the way from Cape Palmas all the way down to Cape Town. I mean, we have that whole coastline. You should see in Cape Cod. In Cape Cod, they have nothing but wind farms. That is helping electricity in the state of Massachusetts. So I mean, it's not the matter that Liberians can do it, but we know that kind of opportunity, and it's coming from signing these agreements, And I think as we go forward after this election, we have to change. We have to make major reform and bring some of the companies to the table and begin to discuss these issues. That's what I have.
Dennis, just to give you a quick insight, right? They measure 600,000 tons of gold, right? Today, 1 ton of gold is probably about $52 million, right? If you multiply that by 600,000 in an Excel spreadsheet, will not even give you a number. You got to put it to exponent.
It was big, right?
It's just too much. So that nearly like 31. What over trillion? What is the next one after trillion? Hey Larry, what is the next number after trillion?
We just said zillion.
Zillion.
31 gazillion dollars. Okay, if you were to do that, but regardless of what they will put in terms of trying to make that initial fixed cost and the operational cost, it pales in comparison to the profit level these people are getting on our country. So for us not to demand that they come with a country plan, and in that country plan, like you say, it got to be clear about schools, about hospitals, about roads. How the criminals from Metal Steel, or not Metal Steel, what do they call it, Sessagoa or whoever in the Western Cluster there, to want to just take our iron ore and drive it, to destroy our environment, drive it from Bombing Hills to the port and just ship it out without any concern for the environmental factors and no concern for the people in terms of jobs, in terms of healthcare, in terms of education, in terms of infrastructure, housing, any of those things. And this government, the people already owe you money to start. They demand that money. They go take 10 million when they're begging for 14 million on one side and begging for even more on the other side, when if we actually approach this in the best interest of our citizens, we can get so much more from it. So it's just incredible, the mindset that the people who are in government have towards the people of Liberia, and it's so sad because, again, it goes back to the lack of education, just basic education for people to develop some level of critical thinking. Most of our people don't have it, so we just get abused consistently. And people who try to explain and understand things, they think they're not seeking their interest. So we are where we are.
Larry, I'll let you come in. My everywhere reporter was saying Kakata, and they were asking the people in the market. They were talking about how hard things are. So he asked, "What do you want the government to do?" And Larry, I mean, as it has to your point, right? About even what we are asking for, they say, well, let them help us. At least they give us money so we can make market and sell. To what extent, Larry, are politicians talking about discussing these things that we are discussing right now, laying out the kind of plan so that people will see, and not just presidential candidates, even for the House, for the Senate, because everything ties to the economy. So if we are not explaining or expressing how these things impact our day-to-day lives and how putting in place what all of you are talking about now can improve things. If we're not talking about them, that's why anytime people get in power, I was asking you, I said, but this seems so easy. Why are we not doing it? Nobody's
It's
explaining
leadership,
anything to us, right?
leadership, vision, will, commitment.
But Larry,
That's
Isaac, you can tell me that someone like President Salih didn't have leadership or vision or all these things. So why are these things not happening?
Look, Dennis, let's be honest here, not to disparage anybody. What did President Salih really lead before she became president? What this woman didn't even pass. This woman, read her biography. She didn't even pass her level 1 economic course when she was doing the certificate program. She had to tell the teacher if she failed, we'll buy her when you go back to her country and he gave her free grade. So what does she understand about the economy? That's why we made a big mistake. I take responsibility for some of that. By even supporting George, we are actor, love our country, and other stuff will make a difference. But that position of leadership is very critical. And right now, it's a vacuum. So far, among all the candidates, only Mr. Cummings can give any semblance of an understanding.
And not to get so political, that's what I was coming to. Even someone like Mr. Cummings is not really explaining when all we're supposed to depend on is, hey, because I was here and I did this.
No, he has explained significantly. He has said many of the things I said today. He has said them. So I don't know what other explanation.
Let me see whether Larry heard them. Larry, you heard them?
So you see, the one thing
and
is
not just Mr. Cummings, right? But politicians.
No, but most of the other people don't have the ability to even deliberate at this level with us in any fashion. None of the other candidates are there, I don't think. Mr. Cummings can probably hold with this conversation. Most of the people can't, to be honest. Larry, go ahead. Sorry.
No problem, Chief. Here's the thing you will always hear. It is so easy, like you just mentioned, Dennis, the solution seems to be out there, but how come we can't seem to grab this solution like how Rwanda did it, how Botswana has done it, how Singapore, Taiwan, all these other countries? Why is it that it has escaped us for so many years? People can tell you all of the things that they can do. The problem is you need to ask them, how are you going to pay for it? Where are you going to get the money from to pay for it? Because relying on the extractive system, we've seen on the extractive sector, we've seen that it doesn't really work out too well, because over a time you would deplete your natural resources and you end up in maybe worse condition, maybe even climate change will impact you. So when the politicians come out and they tell you, say, oh, listen, I can burn down the mansion and build it overnight, where are you going to get the money from and the know-how to do that stuff? They just don't, they cannot articulate, they cannot explain how they're going to raise the money. It requires money. No matter how you carry it on, it requires
money. It requires money. It requires money and investment, right? For some of the key factors that drive this stuff, like you talk about Singapore. Singapore is what? MPH, meritocracy, pragmatism.
But you see how when we had tried to raise money, they went to Eton.
Missing.
Yeah, they went to Eton, they went to Ipoman, they went to all these places. They couldn't raise money.
Thank you, Larry, for bringing that up.
Liberia struggle in raising money because we don't have a credit rating. When you look at Fitch Investor Services, Moody's, Standard & Poor's, we have no credit rating, so there's no way for foreign investors to measure the risk of lending money to Liberia. So that's why Liberia relies. Yeah. So Liberia relies on, the IMF and all these grants. So I don't care. Any politician can come out here and they can say anything they want. I just want to know, okay, how are you going to raise the money? Look, there are ways to fix this problem in Liberia. President Biden always says it. He's always saying it. Don't tell me what you're going to do. Show me your budget and I will tell you what is considered important to you. We spend roughly 90% of our budget on recurrent expenditure.
Yes.
So very little money goes into the drivers for economic growth, including the human capital. So you see, if we're putting more of our money into building the education sector, there will be a lot of young people who, look, COVID changed the way how we do business today. There are people sitting in other countries that are doing business 4,000 or 5,000 miles away from them. We can have
Business
people sitting
process
in Liberia.
outsourcing, Larry.
Absolutely.
Which
We
other
can have people in
countries
Liberia who are
closer
operating
to
on
America than
GMT.
us?
Yeah, people who are operating on Greenwich Mean Time. They can do business from Liberia remotely, but we don't have very good internet. So even though USAID is working right now with Google to bring internet into Liberia, that process is extremely slow because we're doing it, again, with physical manpower. We're not doing it with automation. We're not using the kind of mechanized equipment we need to get to speed it up. Change the budget. Change. And I think, Dennis, you said earlier, we don't have the skilled labor. That's true. But we have physical labor that we can use in the construction sector, in the agriculture sector. We have an abundance of rain, but yet we don't have clean drinking water for our people. We don't have reservoir with clean drinking water for our people. Monrovia is the wettest capital in the world. Over 184 inches of rain per year. And we don't have clean drinking water spread out across the entire country. Why? People just don't have the vision to go ahead and get that done. We have an abundance of sun. Yeah. But when you look in terms of sub-Saharan Africa or the Sahel region where Liberia is looking, we're not using solar panels and renewable energy and all these other things then to bring energy. We're relying on energy being imported into the country. It's because they don't have the vision. They don't know how to raise the capital to pay for it. There are ways you can raise the capital to pay for it. You don't have to go bring scam artists in there. You don't have to go bring Iboma and all those other people in there. There are ways to raise the capital, but why? They don't have the financial know-how to do it. That's why we struggle. 270 plus years, we're still struggling.
Or the people who do have it, who they can relate to, they don't want to. So,
yeah, in view of the above, we are inviting presidential candidates right here on FOL Marketplace to discuss the economy. How do we spur economic growth and economic development? We want to have the discussion. It's very crucial because in 2005, we were voting on who the international community trusts. That is not then 2017 who has the country at heart and all this kind of thing. Let's talk economy.
It will be who can do what. Who can attract investors to Liberia today? Who, if they get in there today, they can attract some people.
And we want to discuss that now. We want to be able to ask those questions now and have that kind of discussion, so that we will know, and we. Will
I can tell you one thing. Only one potential candidate can come on here to discuss that, Mr. Cummings. Nobody else would even take that challenge to come and discuss the economy of Liberia.
I believe all of them can do it. We want to.
Okay, all right. Let's say Mr. Cummings will not do it. I give you 2 months. Let me see which one then you will get.
Most of the time.
But you see, I think, Isaac, you're also missing the point that one person can't possibly know all there is. It's like saying
we're not missing that point. Did I say any one person knows it?
And let me stress on that.
But then you wrongly accusing me. Sorry.
Well, hold up. Listen to the rest of it. Let's say we want to have a conversation on healthcare in terms of healthcare delivery. Mr. Cummings has no background in healthcare. He cannot come here and speak on healthcare and be accurate.
No, we're talking about the economy right now.
I know on the economy. So
no,
maybe
on healthcare, he will send one of the healthcare professionals that they can come.
Why can't the other candidates send one of their economic professionals to come and speak to Mr. Cummings?
They're entitled to do it, but Mr. Cummings said he knows the economy. They're entitled to
it. Right.
I was step up to the plate for boycott.
As a presidential candidate, you have watched presidential debates here, Larry. As a presidential candidate, you must have some kind of working man knowledge of all those things and how they tie into whatever your development plan is. Am I right?
And that's why we are encouraging.
1 second, let me ask Larry. Let me answer to the book and hear him. Am I right?
You can give a high-level overview, but there's no way you can possibly know some of the granular details to
No,
make
we're not going to granular level. We're not going to granular level. Policy is not granular. Everybody can talk policy.
Let's say this. Let's say we're looking to discuss how to, and I think I saw the finance minister and the former guy from LBDI discussing how to use treasury inflationary index bonds to sell that and try to raise money for the government. Let's say we're trying to do something specific like that to raise money for Liberia. Despite the fact that Cummings has background in finance, Cummings doesn't have background in investment banking. He wouldn't know how that process works. He doesn't know how to do securitization because he's never done it in his line of work. If someone is discussing,
let us not debate that
I
now.
disagree with you.
Hold on,
He may
Isaac.
have done
Hold on, Larry.
securitization in his private sector and private equity stuff he dealing
Right,
with.
right.
You can't say
And
yes.
let us not discuss the argument before the argument, right? Let's invite them. We are extending out an invitation. If you can come as a presidential candidate, send a representative. We want to start with the economy. Let's discuss the economy right here on FOL Marketplace. Gentlemen, we have 8 minutes to close. Let's wind it down. And close, we started with economic growth, economic development, the drivers, and then what can we do to spur this economic growth. Let's close with that. Emmanuel, Isaac, and Larry.
Okay. Yep. Okay. For me, economic growth development will come first with the kind of education we investing in our people. I was fortunate when I came to this country to go to school in 1982. I used to play soccer with Malaysia and sing in Knoxville, Tennessee. And every one of those guys was engineering, technological engineering, electrical engineering from the government. Not a single person came from Singapore or Malaysia to this country for school and come on the personal wealth. The government sponsor them, bring them, educate them, and take them back. That's why you see Singapore and Malaysia is leading in electronic and other high-tech area. I think we should start by investing in education. Look, I live here. I live probably about 5 minutes away from MIT. We can send at least 10 or 12 Liberians every year to MIT, high-tech. We need more education. If we have more engineers in the country, have more people that have knowledge about this extractive industry, advise the government that you're selling out yourself. So I would say, what will harness economic and development growth in Liberia, we have to start with education. We have to invest more money in LU, because at the university level, we can get a lot of research and development from those young people. I mean, we're wasting brains, man. I went to school in Cape Town with the Konowa, with Dr. Mabani and all these people. Liberians, when you talk about you talk about thermodynamics, all these things, people can learn those things quickly in Liberia. We have very, very intelligent, intelligent people. I taught in Bombing Hills before I came here. But we have to invest in education. And not just education. Right now, the future is technical education. And I think if we start putting money in sending our young people to places like MIT or Harvard or engineering school or business school. I was fortunate to see a Liberian guy a few months ago who came to Harvard Business School. He's from here. So we have to invest in education before we can start this thing going. Because more Liberian educated in this area, we will not have people coming in there and exploiting us. And that's why Singapore and Malaysia, they went on. Because when those guys graduated, they said, Jackson, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm staying here. The government set up a private jet for their job and take all of them back home to work into companies. Well, we can do the same thing. We need to change all this mindset. So that I would say my biggest thing would be we should invest in high education. If we put at least $200 or $300 million in educating or 6 or 7 or good Liberians, we'll see the better results. So that's just my take on it.
Thank you. And Larry, before you come in, here is from that economic bulletin that I got from there, Real Sector Outlook 2019 to 2023. Talk a little bit about this, and we know that this was done in 2022, September. At the time the report came out, September 2022, and then the projections.
Are those growth percentages?
Larry will explain.
Yeah, so I think they are in fact, and the fact that Dennis is saying this from a previous year. Not only are they just percentages in terms of what they expect the economy to grow, the rate of growth year over year, but they're also projections. So some of the projections are they're kind of ambitious because one thing that's happened over the past, I would say maybe 10, 12 years or so in Liberia, not just Liberia, pretty much the rest of the world, whenever you make these predictions, something always happens. And I think I mentioned this on the last FOL show, right? So they have great predictions in terms of Liberia economy growing. And then by December of 2013, Ebola hit. Even if we go back further, by August of 2008, we had the Great Recession from the US that spread around the world. So every time they have these big projections, it never comes to fruition. It never happens because something always happens. Whether it's COVID, it's Ebola, it's recession, it's the high rate of inflation in the US. So I kind of discount those projections, but you also mentioned in that the data you showed, it shows like real GDP. And real GDP is just the total growth adjusted for inflation, taking some of the inflation items out of it and see what the real growth will be. But that number is still wrong because, again, the reality of it, the economy didn't grow at the rate they were promising. Over 36 months, the Liberian economy fell. That's why people are saying, oh, we're catching hard time. You're catching hard time because there was no growth in the economy. And the reason you're having this is there are a couple of reasons you're having this. Number one, the rule of law doesn't hold in Liberia. You have about 17 people and entities on the U.S. OFAC, the specially designated list, the one we all know as the sanctions list. They have 17 individuals, entities on that list. Five of them are government officials. 5 of them are former government officials. That is high. That is extremely high. The other ones, and this is why when you look at why the country is struggling, you have to look at the rule of law. Even though we have all of the ingredients, it's like you're about to cook a pot of soup. You got your chicken soup. You got all the meat you can name off to cook your pot of soup. But then you have a bad chef. You got somebody who can't cook.
Larry, the fact that you start with chicken soup suggests to me that you can cook.
Yeah, you could be right. That's why I always go and place my order. I'm very good at placing orders.
But let's get our closing comment. Before we come that, we have tonight at 7, we're going to have the Liberia History Channel, Basel 360, a historic narration of Basel from 1461 to 1821. So 360 years of Basel narration. You don't want to miss it. Coming on at 7 p.m. tonight. Let's get your closing and then
to wrap up real quick. And Sam Wolo is right. That's what I was saying. No one candidate will be expert in all field. I know some people try to sell their candidate.
Don't start that debate with Isaac. We don't want to go there. We want to get the candidate.
But Larry, I know why Larry is drawing that kind of baseless conclusion. There is no indication we're talking about the economy. And Mr. Cummings always say, other era, not my era, the economy, not my era. That's why I said no other candidate will come and discuss.
Let me button up my thing.
That's just a fact.
So despite all of the ingredients we have in Liberia to make the economy grow, we have issues with the rule of law. And I know there's been a lot of speculation in terms of why the president is here. I'm not even going to go that route. That's another conversation for another day. But you also have to look at the number of people that have been sanctioned in the country. You have to look at the budget. We are not putting our money, we're not putting our interest, we're not investing in the people. Then we're surprised that the country doesn't grow. You can raise the money you need. You can do all those things. But my final sentence, if you're struggling in Liberia, take a look at the economy. Take a look, and the economy will include the prices you're paying for goods, everything else. If the economy is doing great, hopefully it's not all just going out of the country, the money is staying in. You should be doing better. But until we come in with better leadership, until we come in with people who have vision, people who are using technology, like some of your viewers mentioned, innovative technology, Liberia will continue on the next few years down the same path, and country considered a fragile state. You're going to have a lot of people protesting, and who knows, man, it may not end up well. Thanks so much for inviting me. Always a pleasure, and I love being here with my brother Isaac and Emmanuel. It was nice meeting you and talking to you today, buddy.
Thank you. Isaac, you're closing,
Okay.
and we want you to make this place a home. You said I started talking. Say Isaac spent most time in politics and not so. We want to change that, right?
No, but you got the foundation wrong. That's why I'm trying to correct you. Then when I told you, say I say something to you, you get vexed, you get upset, you cry. But I just warn people before I hit them small. But anyway, back to the topic we're on. Economic development. We have had growth. We have not had development. The fundamentals of development lie in the quality of life that people can lead. And we have not been able to provide that for our people. You look at the access to water. You look at the access to sanitation. You look at the access to electricity. You look at the access to telecommunications. It's all limited, very limited, and some of the worst access in the whole world. And we've been around for the longest time. Until we can get a government that can focus on trying to make changes around those things that can improve the conditions of people. Yes, my brother Emmanuel stressed on education. Education is very critical. But we got to start with that mindset change on how people think and how they want the country to be. How many people you think in Liberia today, if you ask them what your vision and where you want to be, how many people can give you, a substantive answer? Like you were saying earlier, the market women, you ask them, I just ain't got hand, I just want to buy more products to sell. So it's still limited in that space. Why this government, we suggested to them, why can't they take the best market women and try to make them importers or just wholesalers or distributors? Why can't we elevate our people, teach them up to do some of these things? Why is our entire import economy dependent on the Lebanese people? Why can't we give many more Liberians that instant millionaires will make if we can diversify the importation of some of these things? It's not rocket science. It's not rocket science. We need to be more inclusive in our economy for that dollar to circulate domestically. Otherwise, it's transfer capital flight like he was talking about. And now with the money laundering and all the other activities that happen in our country, is illicit financial flows that's really affecting us, and that's across the entire continent. Significant trillions of dollars are leaving our continent because we have governments that don't care, governments that lie in bed with these corrupt people and follow, and allow them to abuse their own citizens. Look, most of the concessions, they abuse their employees. When you're Minister of Labor or some representative from the Ministry of Labor go there, what happens? They go in trying to make a case, they come out smiling and even avoiding the people because they got something in their pocket. Our people are easily compromised for peanuts instead of looking out for the best interest of their citizens. That's the primary thing. Until that mindset can change, where government will commit to working for government to work. Because like my friend Joe Family always say, for government to work, government must work. If the people in government are not willing to do the heavy lifting, do the heavy thinking, to do the heavy planning, and to be committed to implementation of whatever they plan, nothing happens. Our government will not move forward. The opportunities are huge. Liberia, we are bountiful. We are blessed. We have a lot of natural resources. Our people by nature are very smart and intelligent. It's just that we don't develop them. Look, there's just some people who got geniuses. They're all around our country. But for us to bring them to the table, for them to have that opportunity to express and grow that genius, it's just not possible. We look across any sector in the world today, the Liberians are at the top. It's just that because of the mess that happens, they don't want to engage with their own country. But if you open that opportunity for the diasporans to really invest in Liberia, to have equal opportunity on a level playing field, we are competitive. We can be successful. But just unfortunately, our government don't see it that way. They just see about stuff getting in their pockets and leaving the rest of the population out. So hopefully the drivers again are our people who already have land, who already have the physical labor there. They need to be, improved in terms of the level of education and the targeted accelerated learning that we can give them in specific areas. What does our Ministry of Labor do in terms of, job creation or directing people to the job? Even schools and universities, what kind of counseling do we give people? Most of the people that public administration, politics, or something in the social sciences? Do we have a concerted STEM program that will drive people to, that will incentivize people for? No, we don't. And we have to change that up. And then the other factor we got to include is technology. We can leapfrog so many things if we can just introduce technology and start to use. Everything is data driven in the world today. Like Larry was saying, that economy, you can't tell what's wrong with the economy if you don't have data. We need data. We need to collect those things. In the healthcare sector, many of our county and district, healthcare, they stay in Monrovia, right? In the education or the healthcare, they just scramble information on paper to submit. So we don't have legitimate data. We say we got 950 schools, but where are in those schools? We say we got 950 hospitals. Well, what is the real standard of a hospital in Liberia, in those places that we are calling healthcare facilities or hospitals? What do they really have? Unless we look at the data and we look at and have a commitment to move our country far from where we are today, we'll be stuck here. So, and you did a book on civics, preliminary, but you know how important civics is to our people. Most of people don't understand their rights. Most of people don't understand why they vote. Yes, there's your book right there. We also book in schools today. That's what Child Steps International, now Civics and Service International, led by Mrs. Tennant Johnson Kima. That's why in the schools today we have a version that's for the community, but for people to fund that, so more people in the community can understand their basic rights, their basic human rights, why they vote, conflict or mitigation, all of those little simple things that make you a more responsible and better citizen.
That's true.
So we do have a lot of work to do, and you know that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and especially as if for coming at such short notice. Hopefully we can have you back next Saturday. Thank you, Larry. Thank you, Emmanuel, for always focus on FOL Marketplace. The economy is everything. So let's bring the focus on the economy. Almost.
What our statement is: the economy is stupid, right? And what the guy said.
Bravo.
The economy is stupid.
Is the economy stupid?
News cover.
Yeah,
all right.
That's
so
it.
On that note,
If
we close with our song that says, "We are all Liberians." Thank you, guys. Thank our viewers.
Thanks, guys. It was fun, man.
Enjoy your
Appreciate
weekend.
We are Liberians. Liberia is our